What if I told you that Iran, yes, the modern-day nation of Iran, holds a crucial place in the grand narrative of the Bible's prophecy and history? When many think about the Bible, their minds immediately jump to Israel, Egypt, or Babylon. But what if I told you that Persia, the ancient name for Iran, is not just another empire but a nation explicitly named in prophecy to shape the destiny of God's chosen people? The story of Iran's biblical origins is far more fascinating and mysterious than most realize. From the lineage of Noah after the flood to the reign of Cyrus the Great, the Iranians' history intertwines with some of the most pivotal and divine moments in biblical history. Yet the most astonishing revelation is that God used Persia, a kingdom of pagan kings, to deliver Israel from captivity, rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, and fulfill prophecies spoken centuries before they ever came to pass. Today we will unravel the hidden story of Persia. We will explore how the Bible reveals the origins of the Iranian people, their meteoric rise to power, and their central role in both Old Testament events and prophetic visions of the future. Brace yourself, because what you are about to learn will change how you see Iran, not merely as a modern nation, but as a key player in God's unfolding plan for the entire world. The ancient roots. From Noah to Madai, father of the Medes, to understand Iran's place in biblical history, we must begin at the dawn of humanity's new era. After the floodwaters receded, Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the progenitors of all nations on earth. According to Genesis 10, known as the Table of Nations, Japheth's descendants spread across vast territories. Among Japheth's sons was Madai, the forefather of the Medes. The Medes settled in the mountainous region that would later be known as Media, part of modern Iran. Nearby, related tribes evolved into the Persians. These two groups shared a common Iranian ancestry, ultimately forming a powerful alliance that would give birth to the Medo-Persian Empire. This genealogy is not merely a historical curiosity. It situates the Iranian people firmly within the biblical narrative, showing that Persia was never an afterthought but was woven into God's plan from the earliest days of post-flood history. Madai's lineage links Persia to one of the oldest genealogies in the Bible, setting the stage for their momentous role in God's dealings with Israel. Persia's meteoric rise and the rule of Cyrus the Great fast forward several centuries to an era when the great empires of the ancient Near East jostled for dominance. Babylon, under King Nebuchadnezzar, ruled with iron might, having destroyed Jerusalem and taken the people of Judah into exile in 586 BC. The Israelites languished in captivity, their hopes dimming with each passing year. But history turned when a new figure emerged from the east, a visionary leader named Cyrus, son of Cambyses. Born into the Persian royal house, Cyrus would unite the Medes and Persians to form the First Persian Empire, stretching from the Indus River to North Africa. His conquests included many lands familiar to the Bible: Israel, Babylon, and Egypt. Yet, Persia's significance is far greater than its military conquests. God chose Cyrus to accomplish a divine mission, to restore Israel and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Cyrus, God's anointed shepherd. What makes Cyrus's story breathtaking is the prophetic foresight recorded in the book of Isaiah. Over 150 years before Cyrus's birth, Isaiah named him explicitly as God's anointed, a title typically reserved for Israelite kings. In Isaiah 44:28 and 45:1, Cyrus is called God's shepherd, who will fulfill his purpose. How could a pagan, a foreign king, be called God's anointed? The answer lies in God's absolute sovereignty. God raises and uses any person or nation to fulfill his divine plan, even those outside his covenant people. When Cyrus conquered Babylon in 539 BC, he issued a decree that transformed history. The book of Ezra opens with Cyrus proclaiming that, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and appointed him to build a temple for him at Jerusalem." This decree allowed the exiled Israelites to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple. It marked the end of 70 years of captivity prophesied by Jeremiah and the dawn of a restored Israel. Persia's role beyond Cyrus. Esther's courage and divine providence. Persia. His role in the biblical story did not end with Cyrus. The Persian Empire became the backdrop for one of the Bible's most dramatic stories of providence and deliverance, the story of Esther. During the reign of King Xerxes I, also known as Ahasuerus, a sinister plot unfolded. Haman, a high-ranking official consumed by hatred for the Jews, convinced the king to issue a decree to annihilate all Jews within the empire. Enter Esther, a young Jewish woman who had risen to become queen of Persia, encouraged by her uncle Mordecai. Faced with the terrifying prospect of genocide, Esther risked her life by revealing her Jewish identity to the king and pleading for her people's survival. Her bravery and God's providence led to a dramatic reversal. Haman was executed, and the Jews were granted the right to defend themselves. This victory is commemorated annually in the Jewish festival of Purim. Once again, Persia, though foreign and pagan, became the instrument through which God preserved his chosen people. Persia, in the prophetic vision. Daniel's dreams and the divine timeline beyond history. Persia holds a key place in biblical prophecy, especially in the book of Daniel. Daniel, a Jewish prophet living in exile, served in the courts of both Babylonian and Persian kings. Through divine visions, Daniel revealed the rise and fall of empires. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Daniel 2, a giant statue made of various metals represented successive kingdoms. The silver chest and arms symbolized the Medo-Persian Empire, which would succeed Babylon. Later visions in Daniel 7 described 4 beasts representing empires. The second beast, a bear raised on one side, symbolized Persia's dual power from the Medes and Persians. Daniel 8 prophesied the rise of Persia, the ram with 2 horns, and its conquest by Greece, the goat with a prominent horn. These visions place Persia firmly within God's sovereign plan for the world's empires. Persia's lasting legacy, the Magi and religious tolerance. Though Persia eventually fell to Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, its influence endured. 1. Of the most mysterious connections to the New Testament is the Magi, wise men who traveled from the east to worship the newborn Jesus. Many scholars believe these Magi were Persian priests, versed in astrology and ancient wisdom traditions. Moreover, Persia's policy of religious tolerance allowed various peoples to keep their faiths, fostering flourishing Jewish communities and laying foundations for the spread of Christianity. Persia's future role in end times prophecy. Persia's biblical story is not just about the past, it extends to the future. The prophet Ezekiel describes a coalition of nations, including Persia, that will come against Israel in a climactic final battle known as Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 38:39. Though debated in interpretation and timing, Persia's mention highlights its continued spiritual significance in God's unfolding plan for the end times. Conclusion. Persia's divine purpose revealed, from Noah's son Japheth through Madai to Cyrus the Great and beyond, Persia's story reveals the depth of God's sovereignty and purpose. God uses even the most unlikely nations and rulers to accomplish his plan, to restore, protect, and redeem his people. Modern-day Iran's biblical roots remind us that history is more than the rise and fall of empires. It is the unfolding of God's plan for redemption. As the dust settled over the ruined city of Jerusalem, the cries of a broken people echoed through the exile. The mighty Babylonian Empire, under the iron fist of King Nebuchadnezzar, had crushed the hopes of Judah's inhabitants. The temple, God's sacred dwelling place, was reduced to rubble. Thousands of Israelites were carried away from their homeland to distant Babylon, their hearts heavy with despair and their prayers whispered in foreign tongues. Among the captives was a young man named Eliam, whose family had lived for generations in Jerusalem's priestly caste. He had witnessed the fall, felt the ground shake beneath his feet as the temple burned, and now walked the alien streets of Babylon, wondering if God had abandoned his people forever. Yet amidst this darkness, a flicker of divine hope stirred. For God's plan was far from over. Far beyond the walls of Babylon, in the vast and rugged lands of Persia, a new power was rising, one that would change the course of history and ignite a miraculous restoration. The rise of a pagan king. Cyrus, the shepherd of Israel. In the heart of the Persian mountains, Cyrus, son of Cambyses, was forging an empire unlike any the world had seen. His leadership was marked not by mere conquest, but by vision and wisdom. Persia's strength lay in unity, an alliance of Medes and Persians who shared a fierce loyalty and a destiny yet to be revealed. Word of Cyrus's conquests spread swiftly. His armies had taken Babylon, the city that had held Israel captive, for 70 long years. But what set Cyrus apart was a decree that stunned the ancient world. In the name of the Lord, Cyrus proclaimed the liberation of the Israelites. He authorized their return to Jerusalem and commanded the rebuilding of the temple. This was not a mere political maneuver. It was the fulfillment of a prophecy that had echoed through generations. The prophet Isaiah, writing over a century before Cyrus's birth, had declared him God's anointed, his chosen instrument to shepherd his people back home. Isaiah 40:1. Eliam, now an old man, heard the news with tears streaming down his weathered face. Hope was no longer a distant dream, it was a reality. Return to Jerusalem. The journey of restoration among the many exiles who responded to Cyrus's call was Miriam, a courageous woman whose spirit had never dimmed. With her family and fellow Israelites, she embarked on a perilous journey across deserts and mountains, guided by faith and the promise of renewal. The return was fraught with challenges, hostile neighbors, ruined cities, and the daunting task of rebuilding what had been destroyed. Yet, with the blessing of Cyrus and the leadership of Zerubbabel, a descendant of King David, the temple's foundations were laid once again. Miriam's heart swelled with every stone set in place, every prayer uttered in the open air where once the temple's walls had stood tall. The people sang songs of praise, their voices rising like a chorus of angels, testifying that God had not forgotten his covenant. Persia's hidden protector, the story of Queen Esther. But Persia's role was not limited to rebuilding. Deep within the royal palace of King Xerxes, known in the Bible as Ahasuerus, a silent drama was unfolding, one that would test the very survival of God's people. Haman, a proud and ruthless advisor, harbored a venomous hatred for the Jews. With cunning deceit, he convinced King Xerxes to issue a decree that would annihilate all Jews within the empire. Amidst this looming shadow of destruction stood Esther, a young Jewish woman who had been chosen by the king to be his queen. Raised by her uncle Mordecai, she was wise beyond her years, but the stakes were perilously high. When Mordecai urged her to reveal her identity and plead for her people, Esther faced a choice that could cost her everything. With trembling courage, she approached the king, a foreign ruler whose favor was as fickle as the wind. "Who knows," Mordecai whispered, "but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Esther 4:14. Esther's plea pierced the royal heart. Her bravery sparked a turnaround so dramatic it felt like divine intervention. Haman's wicked plot was exposed, and justice was served. The Jews were granted the right to defend themselves, and Persia became a sanctuary rather than a threat. Divine. Providence and Persia's role in God's greater plan. Esther's story is more than just a tale of palace intrigue. It is a testament to God's providential hand working through unexpected people and nations. Persia, a pagan empire, became the instrument of salvation for Israel. A vivid reminder that God's sovereignty knows no borders, and his purposes cannot be thwarted by human schemes. For Eliam, Miriam, and countless others, Persia was not the enemy, but the unlikely hero in the story of their redemption. Persia's prophetic significance, Daniel's visions. While the historical narrative unfolded, the prophet Daniel was receiving divine revelations about the kingdoms that would rise and fall. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream, a colossal statue revealed the sequence of empires destined to shape the world. The silver chest and arms symbolized the Medo-Persian Empire, powerful, vast, and divinely appointed to succeed Babylon. Daniel's visions of beasts and cosmic battles further confirmed Persia's unique place in God's plan. The empire's dual nature, represented by a bear raised on one side, embodied the combined might of the Medes and Persians. Through Daniel, the ancient scriptures revealed that Persia's reign was not an accident, but part of a divine timeline, leading to the coming of the Messiah. The enduring legacy. Persia's influence beyond the empire. Though Persia eventually succumbed to Alexander the Great's forces, its legacy was immortal. The Magi, wise men from the east who journeyed to worship the infant Jesus, are believed to have come from Persia, bringing gifts and knowledge rooted in ancient wisdom. Moreover, Persia's policy of religious tolerance allowed diverse faiths to flourish, creating an environment where Judaism and later Christianity could grow and spread. Persia's role in end times prophecy. The story of Persia does not end with ancient history. The prophet Ezekiel foretold of a future alliance of nations, including Persia, that will rise against Israel in a climactic battle, Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 38-39. While the timing remains uncertain, Persia's inclusion signifies its continuing spiritual relevance. As modern tensions unfold in the Middle East, the biblical narrative reminds us that these events fit into a grand divine design, a story that began in ancient times and will culminate in the fulfillment of God's promises. Conclusion. A nation chosen for a divine purpose, from the flood's aftermath to the court of Cyrus, from exile to restoration. Persia's biblical story is one of divine sovereignty and mercy. God's ability to use even foreign empires for his purpose challenges us to see history not as a series of random events, but as the unfolding of his eternal plan. Modern Iran's ancient roots remind us that God's hand is upon nations and empires, orchestrating history to bring about redemption for his people and the world. As the years passed and the Medo-Persian Empire stretched across vast lands, its significance echoed not only in history books but in the very visions and prophecies that shaped the faith of Israel and the world. The prophet Daniel, a captive in Babylon who rose to become a trusted advisor, received remarkable revelations about the fate of empires and the unfolding of God's ultimate plan. Daniel's vision, the rise and fall of empires. In the courts of Babylon, Daniel interpreted King Nebuchadnezzar's perplexing dream, a colossal statue composed of 4 different metals, each representing a successive kingdom. The feet of iron mixed with clay foretold a divided kingdom, but the chest of silver revealed the Medo-Persian Empire's rise to power. Daniel explained, "The silver you saw represents the kingdom of the Medes and Persians." Daniel 2:32-39. This empire was to succeed Babylon as the dominant force, a kingdom vast and formidable, stretching from the Indus River to Egypt's deserts. This vision was not merely a historical forecast, it was a divine message revealing God's sovereign control over earthly powers. Each kingdom, powerful as it seemed, was transient. God alone held the eternal kingdom. The bear and the ram, symbols of Persia's dual strength. Later, Daniel received a vision of 4 beasts emerging from the sea, each symbolizing empires that would shape history. The second beast, a bear raised on one side, represented the Medo-Persian Empire, symbolizing its dual nature, combining the strength of the Medes and Persians into one. In another vision, Daniel saw a ram with 2 impressive horns charging westward and northward, conquering vast territories. Daniel 8. The 2 horns represented the Medes and Persians working together to establish dominion. This ram would be challenged by a goat, symbolizing Greece, foreshadowing Alexander the Great's conquest. These vivid images offered more than political prophecy. They conveyed the spiritual narrative of God, orchestrating the rise and fall of empires as part of a larger divine plan, culminating in the establishment of his eternal kingdom. Persia's role in the New Testament era. Although the Persian Empire fell to Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, its cultural and religious influence endured. Persian governance, ideas, and religious tolerance shaped the ancient world and laid a foundation for future faiths. One of the most mysterious yet profound connections is found in the story of the Magi, wise men who journeyed from the east to worship the newborn king of the Jews, Matthew 2. Scholars widely agree that these Magi were likely Zoroastrian priests from Persia, steeped in ancient traditions of astrology and omen interpretation. Their journey, guided by a celestial sign, the Star of Bethlehem, symbolized Persia's spiritual legacy intersecting with the coming of the Messiah. It was a moment when the wisdom of an ancient empire recognized the dawn of a new covenant, bridging Old Testament prophecies and New Testament fulfillment, religious tolerance and the spread of faith. The Persian Empire's policy of religious tolerance was revolutionary. Unlike many empires that sought to impose a single religion or culture, Persia allowed its diverse subjects to maintain their religious practices. This policy fostered flourishing Jewish communities throughout the region and created an environment where religious ideas, including early Christianity, could take root and spread. This atmosphere of freedom contributed significantly to the dissemination of the gospel during the Roman Empire. The echoes of Persian tolerance and governance influenced later rulers, including Rome, which became the backdrop for the life and ministry of Jesus Christ. Persia, in end-time prophecies, Ezekiel's vision of Gog and Magog. As history progressed, biblical prophecy continued to place Persia, modern-day Iran, at the heart of spiritual events yet to come. In Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, the prophet describes a future coalition of nations rising against Israel in a climactic confrontation, known as the War of Gog and Magog. Among these nations, Persia is named explicitly as a participant in the alliance that will come against God's people. This prophecy describes a massive, seemingly unstoppable force that will attack Israel in the last days, a spiritual and geopolitical battle of cosmic significance. While interpretations vary about the exact timing and nature of this war, Persia's inclusion underscores its continuing importance in God's unfolding plan. The sovereignty of God over nations. These prophetic visions and historical events reveal a powerful truth. No nation, empire, or ruler acts outside God's sovereign will. Persia's rise, its pivotal role in restoring Israel, and its place in future prophecies demonstrate that God raises up and brings down nations according to his divine purpose. The tension between modern Iran and Israel, which often dominates headlines, is part of a story written long ago, a story where God is the ultimate author and director. Persia's role in the grand narrative of redemption, from Noah's descendants through Madai, the ancestor of the Medes, to Cyrus the Great's liberating decree. Persia's role in the biblical narrative is far from incidental. Persia was chosen as the instrument of restoration for a people bound by covenant to God, yet in exile and despair. The story of Esther's courage amid political intrigue revealed Persia as a protector of God's people. Daniel's visions showed Persia as a critical kingdom within God's prophetic timeline. Even as empires fell and rose, Persia's influence echoed beyond its borders and centuries, linking the Old Testament story with the New Testament and beyond. What Persia's story teaches us today. Persia's story in the Bible teaches enduring lessons about God's sovereignty, providence, and the unexpected ways he accomplishes his purposes. It challenges us to trust that God can use even the most unlikely nations, leaders, and circumstances to fulfill his promises. Persia, a pagan empire, was God's chosen instrument to restore Israel and preserve his covenant. As the world watches the Middle East with tension and uncertainty, Persia's ancient biblical role invites us to look beyond the surface, to see a grand narrative where God's plan is unfolding and history is moving toward ultimate redemption. As the pages of history turn from ancient scrolls to modern headlines, Persia's legacy remains vivid, echoing through the corridors of time and prophecy. The story of Iran, once the heart of the Persian Empire, is far from a closed chapter. It is a living testament to God's sovereign hand, a nation woven deeply into the grand tapestry of biblical destiny. Persia, in the modern world, a nation. With ancient roots, today's Iran, with its rich culture and complex political landscape, carries the weight of millennia of history. It is a land where ancient empires once flourished, and where biblical prophecies find surprising resonance in current events. Many are quick to view Iran through the lens of geopolitics alone, often overlooking the profound spiritual and prophetic significance attributed to Persia in the Bible. Yet for those who study Scripture closely, Iran's role is unmistakable, a key player in the unfolding drama that began thousands of years ago and continues to unfold before our eyes. The War of Gog and Magog, Persia's prophetic destiny in Ezekiel 38-39, the prophecy of Gog and Magog, describes a formidable coalition of nations rising against Israel in a climactic final battle. Persia is named alongside other key players in this alliance, signaling its critical involvement in end-time events. The imagery of this war is vivid and terrifying, a massive coordinated assault against God's chosen people. But the prophecy does not end in despair. God's power will ultimately triumph, delivering Israel and demonstrating his sovereignty over all nations. For modern believers, this prophecy serves as both a warning and a reminder that current conflicts in the Middle East are part of a divine plan, a spiritual battle where God remains in control. The sovereign God of history, Persia's story in the Bible, from Cyrus's decree to Esther's courage, from Daniel's visions to Ezekiel's prophecies, points to a single, unshakable truth. God is sovereign over history. No empire rises without his permission. No leader rules apart from his will. Persia's ancient kings, though pagan, were instruments in God's hands, fulfilling prophecies and advancing his plan of redemption. This sovereignty challenges modern assumptions about power and control, inviting faith in a God who orchestrates even the greatest empires to fulfill his eternal purposes. Lessons from Persia's biblical narrative. Persia's biblical narrative offers powerful lessons. God uses the unexpected. Cyrus, a pagan king, became God's anointed, chosen to restore Israel. This teaches that God's methods often surprise us, working through unlikely people and nations. Restoration follows exile. Persia's decree marked the end of Israel's captivity and the beginning of renewal, reminding us that even in the darkest times, God's restoration is possible. Courage in adversity. Esther's bravery shows how individuals can make a profound difference when they step into God's plan with faith and boldness. Prophecy guides understanding. Daniel and Ezekiel's visions help believers interpret history and current events through the lens of divine purpose. Persia's influence on world religions and cultures beyond politics and prophecy. Persia's influence shaped religious thought and cultural exchange. The Zoroastrian faith, with its dualistic worldview of good and evil, echoes in Jewish and Christian apocalyptic literature. Persian customs, governance, and philosophies permeated the ancient Near East, affecting the spread of Judaism and Christianity. The Magi's journey from Persia to worship Jesus symbolizes this enduring spiritual legacy, a bridge between ancient wisdom and the new covenant. The continuing story, Iran and the future. As the world watches the Middle East's shifting alliances and conflicts, biblical prophecy reminds us that Iran's role is not incidental, but integral to God's unfolding plan. Whether through political tension or spiritual confrontation, Persia, Iran, remains at the center of the prophetic stage. The ultimate outcome is assured. God's kingdom will triumph, and his promises to Israel and the world will be fulfilled. This perspective calls believers to prayer, vigilance, and hope, a faith that trusts in God's sovereign design amid uncertainty. Conclusion. Persia's story is our story, from the floodwaters that receded over Noah's Ark to the decree of Cyrus. From the courage of Esther to Daniel's prophetic visions, Persia's biblical narrative is a powerful testimony of God's providence. It teaches us that history is more than dates and events. It is the unfolding of a divine plan, a story where no nation or empire is beyond God's control. Modern Iran, the ancient Persia of Scripture, is more than a geopolitical entity. It is a living symbol of God's mysterious and sovereign work in the world. As we watch current events and anticipate prophetic fulfillment, Persia's story invites us to see beyond the surface, to trust that God is at work, shaping history, for his glory and the redemption of all creation. Thank you for following this journey through Persia's profound biblical role. If you found this story enlightening, feel free to share and discuss the incredible ways history and prophecy intertwine. Through this ancient land,